Good evening. Welcome to Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector podcast. I am your host, Tabatha L. Tonight, I will highlight some of the electrical code issues that I frequently have when I'm doing electrical temp occupancy inspections. As the electrical inspector, my job is to verify that the building complies with all of the local authority having jurisdiction ordinance, the National Electrical Code requirements, and electrical safety requirements. My job is to ensure all life safety issues involving the electrical systems are electrically code compliant and will not cause bodily harm or electrical shock hazard. I'll start by answering the question, what is a temporary certificate of electrical occupancy? I'll call it a electrical temp occ. It gives the general contractor and the owner, the tenant, it gives them permission to enter the space to allow them to set up for their business to start. So whatever they need to do to come inside that space to set up, that's what that certificate is granting them permission to do. So as the electrical inspector, I'm there to make sure that everything is safe electrically before they move into that space. So it gives them permission to bring people inside and to bring equipment inside, to bring appliances inside, to bring listed electrical equipment inside, to train the personnel, to stock office supplies, and to set up any type of systems that they may have, such as point of sales or equipment, POS system. The electrical temp occ, it states that the building is electrically safe but has minor repairs to resolve before the final will be given. So at this stage right here, we're just allowing you to come in and get your business up and running. The next question I have, which temp occ, electrical temp occ, should I call in first? Temp occ should I call in first? The building inspector or the electrical inspector? I'm doing the electrical, so I will come before the building inspector. As the electrical inspector, I do electrical inspections for municipalities. So there's a process that we do with me coming first, passing the inspection, and then once I pass the inspection, you can call for your building inspection. But if the electrical fail, the building inspector cannot pass the building inspection until the electrical pass. So that's the process. I have another question that I get asked often. Who is responsible for generating the electrical temp occ? The general contractor, that is the person that normally takes control of this situation at this point in the job, because now he wants to occupy that space. So he has to go to the municipality or the jurisdiction and apply for a temp occ for each entity, the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical, and the building. So depending on how that municipality has that set up, the electrical inspection is separate. It has to pass before the building. So who's responsible is the general contractor. Typically, our electrical temp occs last 30 days or 60 days. If you need an extension, it will be allowed. The maximum that we allow is 90 days before you are required to renew your permit. On the large construction jobs with several different contractors, which permit will the general contractor use to get the electrical temp OC? So with several different contractors on the job site, the general contractor, he needs to use the permit from the electrical contractor that has the power, the main distribution power, that had the temp on service energized. That's who he needs to, that's the permit that needs to be called in for the temp OC or used to get the temp OC. So the electrical contractors that are there, the low voltage, they're subcontractors. The main contractor is required. So that would be the electrical contractor doing the power. I get asked this question a lot. How much does a temp OC cost? I don't have the answer to that. You can contact your local municipality for the price, and they'll give you that information. So I'll get into some issues that I have when I'm doing this type of inspection, electrical temp OC. The construction area is still under construction. And all the electrical rooms and mechanical rooms, the utility rooms, they must be secured from the public. Authorized personnel only in these areas. Because I do see that when I am coming on the job to do the temp OC. So if you call for a temp OC, make sure that all the areas that you're requesting the temp OC for, I'm able to get into those locations. If I have to walk through and make sure that everything in those spaces are electrically safe, that's something that I need to see. So one of the things that I want to mention before I move on is what I'm actually looking for when I get there. I'll start with a rule that I've been taught, 8 feet and below. Anything that's 8 feet and below that I can physically touch, electrical receptacles, wall receptacles, floor receptacles, switches, electrical equipment, anything that I can physically touch that has an open splice, that's going to hold up your temp OC, because everything at this point should have covers on, and there should be no open slices throughout the place. So I'm looking for things like that that could hold up your temp OC. And if you're walking with me, some of those things you can correct at that moment. So it's good to always walk with the inspector. So when I'm walking through these type of projects, now I'm looking to see the safety, the electrical safety aspect of it. So the major ceiling work should be completed at this time. There are times that I come on the job and the ceiling should be closed, but they're doing a wire pull. And they have spools of cables set up to pull cable. So that type of stuff should be already done because we did the ceiling cover last week. So that's something that I shouldn't see. I also wanted to mention that this has happened to me when I have done electrical temp OCs. Loss of power. I have to check certain things, so if you lose power for some reason, just give me a call before I get there, and I can cancel the inspection and reschedule it for another day. So as I mentioned, I'm looking for anything that's 8 feet and below with the open splices, none of that. Egress lighting. You must have a lighting outlet in each room that has people inside that you want to occupy that space. Those are some of the things: exit signs, egress lighting. So those are some of the things I'm looking for. So I'm going to get into the issues that I have when I do these type of inspections, the electrical temp op. At this point in the job, there should be no pending issues. There should be no issues for listing issues or anything like that we need to discuss. So if you have any listing issues, you should have a contract. Something should be under contract so that we can move forward knowing that in good faith that this is going to get taken care of before the final is given. So if that contract is in place, that's how we have an agreement and we're going to move forward and allow it to take place. But some of the listing issues that I frequently have on these jobs are adjustable desks. I have that often. The adjustable desks are the ones that move up and down. They have the different electrical components on them, like the receptacle. It can have the USB jack. It can have speaker phones. It's just a group of electrical components that are not listed as a complete assembly. So I do have those often. The problem with the adjustable desk, some come out with the listing stickers and some don't. So if that happens on that job and we have a mixture, all of the electrical adjustable desks must have those stickers on. So just keep that in mind. If I see a few of those, that's going to be an issue that needs to be resolved before we go forward with the temp op. Transition fittings for the conference room. So they have these conference tables and they have transition fittings that are not listed. And that's been an issue for some time now. And once it arrives on the job site, now it's an issue if it left the factory like that. Someone has to come out on the job site and actually evaluate this table, because the National Electrical Code doesn't allow for transition fittings unless they're listed for that application. So as we do in the trade, taught that as well, we'll take a heavy wall rigid coupling that's threaded on the inside, and then we'll take whatever we want to transition, whatever that connector is, whether it's EMT pipe or flex, and we'll screw those two together, and that's a transition fitting that we use in the trade. I was taught that as well, but it's not listed. And that's the problem with the inside diameter being tapered down with the threads. So that's an issue. So that's something that I have had several issues with. So please keep that in mind before it comes on the job site. Hotel furniture, I've had a problem with that. The listed headboards, the headboards are not listed, and the bathroom mirror, the lit mirrors, they're not listed. So keep that in mind with the hotel furniture. Auditorium chairs and theater and school chairs, those must be listed before they arrive on the job site. And another issue that I've had with listings would be display signs, like for financial institutions, they'll have like the big display NASDAQ sign, and it's just display LED panels. That has to be listed as a complete assembly because it's coming out with different components. And what we found what I found on a few of my jobs is that the the list, it had several different components, but it was splice, unauthorized splice with 12 gauge splice with 14 gauge. So those are the things that we are looking at when we're looking at special items that comes out on the job. If it's going to be listed as a complete assembly, that's something that you really need to pay close attention to when ordering special electrical equipment. The malls, the malls, they have display cabinets and display lighting signs. Those must be listed. The jewelry store display cabinets, those must be listed as well. So remember that. The kiosks. In the mall, you have kiosk stations. And in some office buildings now, I can say that because I had a kiosk that wasn't listed. In the kiosk in the office, it was for vending machines. And it had the everything you needed to use, and it came out pre-assembled with receptacles, lighting, the actual machines, but it had no overall listing. So that was an issue. And then the kiosk pre-wired equipment in the mall as well. So keep that in mind. Those are some of the things that I have had issues with listings. So for the temp OC, before we can move forward with getting a temp OC, we have to have some type of understanding or agreement allowing you to do that before the final will be given in the temp OC. Issue that I have on my inspections are arc fault protection for dormitory rooms. That's the issue with some of the dormitory rooms, and I just want to tell you to remember those when you're calling for the temp OC, because if we're going to allow them to move in, arc fault is a life safety device, so that needs to be installed and working prior to that space being occupied. Tamper-resistant receptacles are required before you get electrical temp OC. In the following locations, with the guest rooms, the hotel suites and motel suites, daycares and school, child care facility, and keep in mind, because I had this on one job, a church daycare, because it's child care facilities. So just keep that in mind, nurseries and places like that. Before you occupy those spaces for the electrical, those tamper-proof receptacles must be installed. And in the 2020 code, that changed and it expanded to more locations. And I have a few of those that I was going to mention just to keep in mind. I think. So that expansion includes, it says, business offices and assisted living facilities. So those are a couple of the new ones for the 2020 that the tamper-resistant receptacles are going to be required for those locations as well. So the weather-resistant receptacles, the problem that I have with this is that if it's outside, the weatherproof enclosure cover, the bubble cover, they normally miss that and have a regular receptacle on there, but that's required as well. So don't forget the bubble cover, Article 406.9A1. Here's a big one that I have. I fail often. The drinking fountains, the water fountains, and vending machines But for the water fountains must be GFCI protected. The problem that I have with these, the GFCI is behind the cover. The receptacle is behind the water fountain cover. The GFCI must be readily accessible. So you can't use a tool or any type of because it has to be readily accessible. So with that cover requiring a special tool, you can't use a GFCI receptacle behind there. You would have to use a breaker. You can use a regular receptacle and protect it with a breaker. So that's something that I have often. It has to be readily accessible and capable of being reached quickly without using a tool. Okay. So now I'm walking through the job site and I'm checking for egress lighting outside as well. If you want to occupy that space, you have to have a way out of that space. So I need to know if you have egress lighting working, just in case something runs into the night. You have to be able to see your way out of the building. And no open boxes, no trip hazards, no pole lights need to be open, anything like that. And now we're at the temp OC. You should have ordered your ballards for your parking garage spaces. This should have been ordered at this point. If you want to occupy a garage area, these will need to be installed before you occupy that space. If you want to exclude it, then they can be installed before you get an electrical final. If you have a sign, or if you know that the sign, you're going to have a sign and you don't know the company yet, at the point of the electrical temp OC, you should know who the sign company is at this point. So that's going to be something that I'm going to ask as well. Here's something that I have often at hotels. 15 amp rating, 15 amp condensing units, the AC units inside the rooms. Those units are normally not on site until the rough cover process. The problem that I've had is that they're rated at 15 amps. The maximum for most commercials, you use a 20 amp unless special equipment calls for a 15 amp. The 20 amp is installed. So that's something that's major, because if you have over 100 hotel rooms, now that's going to hold up the temp OC if you have to change out all of those breakers to accommodate the nameplate rating, which is Article 422.60. And I pulled that information from Article 440.3. AC units shall be considered appliances, and you can use Article 422 shall comply. So just keep that in mind. Most of those are installed on a 15, but please check them prior to the temp OC inspection, the electrical. Here's a big one I have, and I'm learning to, before we get to the temp OC stage, to make sure that we look at the rooftop units, the disconnecting means for the rooftop unit. So with the rooftop unit, the problem that I have on most of these projects, this really applies to the multi-purpose function spaces such as retail stores, and then you have condominiums, because you can have more than 100 plus AC units on top of a flat roof. There's certain wiring requirements that must be met if you're on top of a roof. You have to use threaded conduit. You have to have a threaded. It has to be capable of being protected against physical damage. Now, the problem that I've had on several jobs, seal type has been used. You can't. That's not allowed. It doesn't allow for physical protection. Also, a problem that I've had with these are AC, the disconnect switches. The disconnect switches, if you have so many units, they have to be located on the AC unit or right next to it. So that article is Article 400.40, 440.14. And that's something that there's a policy on, because that's a big issue and a big misunderstanding in the industry that we need to get an understanding on and some type of clarity for the contractors that you can't group them together 50 feet away and use that principle within 50 feet or within sight. That doesn't apply to the AC units. So that's something that I'm learning to do right in the middle of the job process, somewhere around the ceiling covers and the wall covers if you're doing the AC units. But just keep that in mind, that that's a big one. And if you're on one of my jobs, let's talk about that before we get to the temp op, because that's a big issue. If you have any issues that you were unable to complete while you were doing this construction project and they want to move in as soon as possible, but that's going to hold up the project, you are allowed to take out a new permit and permit that new electrical work, that the completion of that electrical work. You are allowed to do that. So you can take out a separate permit for that, and that'll keep the job going as well and keep it on task. With that being said, that concludes my temp OC inspection. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me on any of the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, under Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector. If you would like to add to this discussion or provide any feedback, please email me at asktheladyelectricalinspector@gmail.com with any questions or concerns. Thank you, and good night.